In 21 days, I was in Kalash TKED. You know, my muscle mass had gone down. My legs had become like this always. I've been walking, trekking, playing games, but my muscle mass went down so much in these 8 weeks, I just shrank like that. 3 weeks ago, a 94-year-old Chinese monk named Chen Huimin did something that could get him killed. After 6 decades of silence, he finally revealed what's written in the forbidden texts hidden beneath his monastery in Ching Hai province. Texts that describe Mount Kyash not as a mountain, but as a machine, an ancient structure deliberately placed on Earth by beings who existed long before humans. And according to these texts, that machine is still running. The monks call it the anchor point. They say it generates a field that warps time, destroys electronics, and drives anyone who gets too close to the edge of madness. They say climbers who spent 12 hours on its slopes came back aged by decades. Their organs deteriorated. Their hair turned white. Most of them died within 2 years. But here's what the monks have never told anyone until now. There's something buried beneath that mountain. Something the texts call the seed of the next world. And the mountain is protecting it. The time distortion. Most visceral content. First master. Chen's hands trembled when he described what the ancient texts say about time near Mount Kyash. His translator had to stop twice because the old monk kept pausing, looking toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in and silence him. Time does not flow there, he finally said. It pools. It accelerates. It takes from you what you cannot get back. The monks have known this for centuries, but the Russians proved it in 1999. A scientific expedition led by Dr. Yuri Vulov encountered a group of Siberian climbers returning from Kyash's slopes. Volkov was a hardened researcher, 20 years in extreme altitude medicine. Nothing rattled him, but what he saw that day made him abandon his expedition and flee the region entirely. The climbers had been gone for 12 hours. 12 hours. But they came back looking like they'd aged 20 years. Always I've been walking, trekking, playing games. But my muscle mass went down so much in these 8 weeks, I just shrank like that. Hair that had been jet black was now streaked with gray. Beards had grown weeks longer than physically possible. Fingernails extended past their fingertips and their faces. Deep lines, sagging skin, the hollow look of men who had seen something that broke them. Volkov documented everything in a private journal that wasn't published until after his death. He wrote, "Their eyes were the worst, not frightened, empty, as if they had seen something that erased part of who they were. When we asked how long they had been on the mountain, they couldn't agree. One insisted it had been weeks. Another swore it was only hours. They became agitated, almost violent when we pressed them. And get this, Vulov ordered medical examinations of those climbers before they left the region. What he found defied everything medical science understands about the human body. Their organs showed deterioration consistent with men in their 80s. Cellular damage that should take decades had occurred in half a day. Blood markers indicated extreme biological stress, as if their bodies had lived through years of aging in a single afternoon. Within 2 years, every single one of those climbers was dead. Heart failure, organ collapse, conditions that don't happen to healthy men in their 30s. The only thing connecting them was those 12 hours on Mount Kyash. The monks weren't surprised when they heard this. According to Master Chen, the ancient texts specifically describe an influence zone extending 15 kilometers from the peak in all directions. Within that boundary, normal rules collapse, time compresses, bodies age, and something watches to see how much you can endure before you break. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. Pilgrims have walked circuits around Kailash for thousands of years, believing that each circuit erases years of bad karma. They weren't speaking metaphorically. The texts describe literal time exchange. Walk the circuit and time shifts. Approach the summit and time accelerates violently. The mountain doesn't just age you. It takes something you can never define. Hours, years, futures that belong to you. And it doesn't ask permission. But time distortion is only one symptom of what's happening at Kyash. The monks say the mountain has been rejecting humans for as long as anyone can remember, and the way it does that is even stranger than accelerated aging. If what you're hearing right now is making the hair stand up on the back of your neck, you're not alone. This is exactly the kind of content we dig into every week. Ancient mysteries, forbidden knowledge, things that mainstream science refuses to touch. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss what's coming next. Because what I'm about to tell you about the mountain psychological defenses makes the time distortion look almost normal. The unclimbable peak. No one has ever reached the summit of Mount Kyash. Not one person. Not in all of recorded history. That's not because people haven't tried. It's because the mountain won't let them. But after 3 weeks observing Kyash, he packed his equipment and declared the mountain utterly unclimbable. His expedition notes reveal something strange. Rutledge didn't cite ice conditions or technical difficulty. He wrote about a feeling, a pressure that built in his chest the closer he got. An overwhelming certainty that the mountain was aware of his presence and did not want him there. His guides refused to continue. 3 of them had nightmares so severe they woke up screaming, clawing at their own faces. Rutledge himself admitted that leaving felt less like retreat and more like being allowed to escape. The pattern continued for decades. In 2001, a Spanish climbing team secured one of the rarest permits in mountaineering history, official authorization to attempt Kyash's summit. One of the men said afterwards that it was like starting a new life. Their extraordinary feat has been submitted for inclusion into the Guinness Book of World Records. These were elite climbers, Everest veterans, K2 survivors, men who had conquered every technical challenge the Himalayas could throw at them. They never made it past base camp. Reports from team members described sudden hallucinations, visions of loved ones dying, of the ground opening beneath them, of things moving in their peripheral vision that vanished when they turned to look, crippling nausea that appeared without warning and vanished just as quickly. And most disturbing, a shared psychological experience they struggled to put into words. A certainty deep and absolute that continuing forward would end in something worse than death. Russian climber Sergei Chisakov described his experience in an interview that was later suppressed by local authorities. He was shaking as he spoke, chain-smoking cigarettes. Refusing to make eye contact with the camera. His translator said Chisakov hadn't slept properly in months. I felt altitude sickness. Yes, he said, but this was different. My heart raced for no reason. A thought repeated in my head over and over. You do not belong here. It wasn't my thought. It came from outside, from the mountain. I could feel it pushing against my mind like a hand pressing on my skull. The moment he decided to turn back, every symptom vanished. He said it felt like being released from a grip he hadn't realized was holding him. Relief flooded through him so intensely he wept. The monks confirm what the climbers experienced. The ancient texts describe the mountain's psychological defenses in precise detail. They call it the field of rejection, an energy that doesn't attack intruders, but convinces them to leave. It identifies the weakness in each person's mind and amplifies it until retreat becomes the only option. But here's the catch. The texts also warn that the mountain's defenses extend beyond psychology. The closer you get, the more reality itself starts to break down. And the first thing to fail is always technology. The machine failures, compasses go insane. Near Mount Kyash, needles spin endlessly without settling or lock in place, refusing to respond. In a landscape where landmarks repeat and weather shifts without warning, losing your compass isn't an inconvenience. It's a death sentence. Trackers have documented this phenomenon for decades. One German expedition in 2015 brought 6 compasses from 3 different manufacturers. All 6 failed simultaneously within 8 kilometers of the peak. The expedition leader, a former military navigator, described watching the needle spin in perfect synchronization, as if responding to the same invisible signal. Higher above the mountain, pilots have reported phenomena that no one can explain. Come here. Aircraft are prohibited from passing directly in over the peak, officially classified as restricted airspace. But the real reason isn't in any government document. Pilots who've flown near the region describe instruments giving contradictory readings simultaneously, altimeters showing impossible numbers, heading indicators spinning backward, sudden complete signal loss that lasted exactly as long as they were closest to the peak. Turbulence appearing out of nowhere in perfectly clear conditions, not the gradual buildup pilots expect, but instant violent shaking that stopped as abruptly as it started. Modern aircraft rely on redundant systems specifically designed to prevent multiple simultaneous failures. Near Kyash, those systems fail anyway. One commercial pilot who requested anonymity said he's flown that route dozens of times. Every single flight, he said, something goes wrong that shouldn't be possible. My co-pilot and I don't talk about it. Neither does anyone else. But we all know drones add another layer of evidence. Documentary crews have attempted to fly unmanned vehicles near the slopes, hoping to capture footage of the summit that no human has ever seen. Most never made it far. Some lost signal and dropped straight from the sky like stones. Others returned garbled footage. Images that looked corrupted, distorted, as if something had interfered with the data itself. Faces appeared in static. Shapes that shouldn't exist flickered across frames. Engineers examined these devices afterward and found no physical damage. No explanation for the failures. The machines simply stopped working within range of the mountain, then functioned normally once removed from the area. One technician reportedly refused to analyze any more cache equipment after the 3rd drone. He quit his job a week later. Master Chen nodded when we described these accounts. The texts predicted this. He said the anchor point generates a field that rejects what is artificial. The closer you approach, the stronger the rejection becomes. Your machines are not welcome there. Neither are you. And get this. The monks say the technology failures aren't random. They're targeted. The mountain somehow identifies what humans rely on to feel in control and systematically disables it. First, navigation, then communication, then the devices themselves. By the time climbers realize what's happening, they're already disoriented, isolated, and fighting the urge to run. But the monks revealed something about Kyash that goes beyond defense mechanisms. Something that suggests the mountain isn't just protecting itself. It's watching, and it has eyes. The twin lakes, 2 lakes, sit at the base of Mount Kyash, separated by a narrow strip of land. They couldn't be more different. Lake Manasaravar is perfectly still, fresh water, mirror smooth even when wind howls across the plateau. At extreme altitude, when every other body of water locks into ice, Manasar refuses to freeze. Its surface remains calm, reflective, almost artificially serene. Beside it lies rock Shastal, saline, restless. Its water churns constantly. Travelers who stand between the 2 lakes describe feeling a boundary they can't see, a threshold between opposing forces. Master Chen's voice dropped when he spoke about the lakes. He glanced at his fellow monks before continuing, as if checking whether he should reveal what came next. The texts call them the mountain's eyes, he said quietly. Manasaravar watches the sky. Rakshastal watches what lies beneath. Together they form a surveillance system that has operated for millennia. Nothing approaches Kyash without being observed. Nothing. At night, Manasaravar becomes stranger. Witnesses describe small points of light crossing the surface. Not reflections of stars, but independent sources moving in patterns that suggest intention. The water changes color from day to day, cycling through blues, greens, and occasional crimson hues that have no geological explanation. The land around the lakes shifts in ways that defy mapping. Pilgrims walking the ritual circuit speak of trails that fade and reappear between footsteps, rocks that stand solid 1 hour and vanish the next. The terrain offers no collapse, no erosion, just a quiet refusal to remain consistent, as if reality itself becomes unstable. This close to the mountain, photographs taken at the lakes rarely match what witnesses remember seeing. Sounds travel wrong, arriving late, distorted, or not at all. But in terms of the volume and the variety that's been deposited in Kyash, it is the place. So this is why it is known as a Shiva. Even silence feels layered, echoes that never fully fade. The monks say this is intentional. The lakes don't just observe, they distort perception, testing whether visitors can be trusted with what lies beyond. Most fail without knowing they were being tested. Basically, if the time distortion is the mountain's weapon and the psychological pressure is its shield, the lakes are its intelligence network. And all of it, every defense, every phenomenon exists to protect what the monks say is hidden at the heart of Kyash. Something that finally explains why this mountain matters more than any other place on Earth: the impossible geometry. From a distance, Mount Kyash doesn't look natural. Unlike every other Himalayan peak, shaped by violent tectonic forces carved asymmetrically by glaciers, Kyash rises with near-perfect symmetry. 4 steep faces descend toward the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. The edges are clean, measured, the kind of geometric precision that should not exist in nature. Master Chen spread a map across the monastery floor and began drawing lines. His hands moved quickly, connecting points he seemed to know by heart. The anchor point was not placed randomly. He said, "Watch." He drew a line from Kyash to the Great Pyramid of Giza, extended it further. It passed directly through Stonehenge, technology that could move and shape matter in ways we cannot currently comprehend. Geologists offer alternative explanations. Glaciers can carve pyramidal peaks. Sediment can fracture in straight lines. Symmetry can occur naturally. But here's the deal. Even those explanations acknowledge how extraordinarily rare Kyash's form is. The combination of perfect symmetry, precise cardinal orientation, and preservation over millennia places this mountain in a category almost by itself. It's not the only geometric peak in the world. It's one of the only ones that looks deliberately constructed from every single angle. The monks don't hedge. They state it directly. Kyash was built. The ancient texts use a term that translates to the shaped stone, implying deliberate design rather than geological accident. And everything strange about the mountain, the time distortion, the psychological defenses, the technology failures. The Watching Lakes exists because the structure is still active, still functioning, still protecting whatever was placed inside it thousands of years ago. The Hall of Records, Master Chen, saved the most disturbing revelation for last. The monastery had grown quiet. The other monks had left the room one by one, as if they knew what was coming and wanted no part of it. Through the window, clouds gathered over distant peaks. A wind had picked all up outside, rattling the ancient wooden shutters. When Master Chen spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The texts speak of a chamber," he said. "Deep beneath the mountain, not a tomb, not a treasure vault, something else entirely." He called it the Hall of Records. According to the ancient texts, this chamber contains knowledge that predates human civilization by tens of thousands of years. Information about what we truly are, about abilities and histories that have been deliberately erased, and most disturbing of all, detailed descriptions of what is coming. Events the texts call the turning that will transform human existence entirely. The texts call it the seed of the next world. Master Chen said, "I do not fully understand what that means, but the texts make clear that this knowledge is not meant for humanity. Yet, the mountain's purpose, every defense, every phenomenon, every death exists to ensure the Hall of Records remains sealed until the proper time." We asked the obvious question: when would that time come? How would humanity know it was ready? Master Chen's expression changed. For the first time, something that might have been fear crossed his face. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "We won't choose," he said quietly. "The mountain will choose. It always has. For 4 major religions, Mount Kyash represents the center of the universe. Hindus believe Shiva sits in eternal meditation at its summit. Now the devotees of Lord Shiva can have a view of Tibet's Mount Kailash from Uttarakhand in India. Uttarakhand tourism has launched a pilgrimage for the view of Mount Kailash from Indian soil. Buddhists see it as the Mandalola of ultimate enlightenment. Jains hold it as the site of their first teacher's liberation. The Bond religion considers it the seat of all spiritual power. Different faiths, different interpretations, but all agree on one point. This place anchors something greater than itself. 4 major rivers of Asia originate from the region surrounding Kailash: the Indus, the Sut, the Brahmaputra, the Karnali. 4 rivers flowing in 4 directions, sustaining nearly half of humanity. The monks say this is not coincidence. The mountain was placed at the source point deliberately, feeding life across the planet, while guarding secrets that could end it. Everything connects. The time distortions that age climbers by decades. The psychological pressure that turns hardened mountaineers into trembling wrecks. The technology failures that strip away every tool humans rely on. The twin lakes watching everything that approaches. The impossible geometry that mathematicians say cannot occur in nature. And beneath it all, a chamber containing knowledge about human origins and human destiny that we are not yet allowed to access. Mount Kyash has stood unmoved for millennia. The question is, what happens when the mountain decides humanity is finally ready? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if this video kept you watching until the end, smash that like button and subscribe immediately. We're going deeper into forbidden knowledge that mainstream sources won't touch. The next video reveals what we found when we investigated the geometric alignments Master Chen showed us.